Good evening, everybody. It's me, Kentario. I'm back again with Christ and comic books. And guess what, everybody? I got it. I got him. I got him. Hey, so my buddy George, I want to express my gratitude to him for allowing me to borrow his manga. He let me borrow his 3 volumes of Death Note. I actually took 4. Don't tell him. No, but seriously, I borrowed my buddy George's books of Death Note to be able to speak to some of the spiritual aspects of the book, to speak to what the underlying things that are being revealed throughout the story, because I think it's so important to really kind of see those relations. One, to see what the writer themselves, the illustrator themselves, was looking to bring about by creating this actual story. But on top of that, like I've said before, in my It's Me video, in the video that I've done for my intro, in the very first video I even recorded, the reason I'm doing this, the reason that I talk about these things is because I see things involved in this that do speak to, one, some religious things, but personally to my relationship with Christ that I think is so very vital. And so I really want to kind of just get into, this book a little bit, just kind of do a little bit of an introduction, not to actually start talking about the book just yet. We're going to be doing that a little bit later, hopefully maybe by Wednesday, if not by next Sunday. We're going to be actually starting talking about the actual content in the book itself. And to kind of give you a brief summary of what this is about, the Death Note itself is a book that was dropped into the human world, our world, and someone stumbled upon this book and learned that if you put someone's name in this book, that person will die. Now, in that book are listed rules and expectations around what you can do and can't do as far as, the ending of someone's life. So what happens with that is you get to see what would happen if that fell into the hands of someone. Not only falling into the hands of someone who is genuinely intellectual. Not only falling into the hands of someone who is intellectual, but also falling into the hands of someone who is, I guess you could say, psychologically more advanced than the average person. He's thinking on another level when it comes to going through with actually taking someone's life. It's not just, oh, I don't like you, let me kill you. It's not that simple in his approach and in the way that the story is written. So that is one of the vital keys with that. Now, to get into more detail, the reason this book was dropped into this world was because it was dropped by something known as a Shinigami. A Shinigami exists in this storyline in a different world. He got bored in that world and wanted to do things in the human world. So to start up, I guess you could call it controversy, you could call it let's see where it goes kind of thing, he dropped the book off in a random neighborhood just to see who would pick it up, to see who would follow through with it, and to see if they would actually start taking people's lives. So that is what's taking place in the story of Death Note. Some intertwining details. One, let me start by talking about a Shinigami. A Shinigami, otherwise known as a Soul Reaper, Spirit Reaper, the Grim Reaper, that's other interpretations, is not a major part, but a part of the Japanese mythological culture. What they do is, at least from their original standpoint of the Shinigami, they partake in feeding on the human life force. In some illustrations, you can see that they kind of fall into line with a vampire in the sense of their illustration and in the sense of the way that they feed on the human life force, their soul. You can see them in other iterations to form in a way of skeletal, like in bone, or them looking as though they're shriveled up in the human body kind of look. That's the way that they're illustrated, and that's also the way that they're illustrated for this manga storyline's sake. Now, if you've seen my video where I'm introducing some of the books involved in my collection, I introduced some books that are written and illustrated by the same people that made Death Note, this was their original success story, or original book that they put out that was a huge success. So the creators are Tsugumi Ohba and Takeshi Obata. Takeshi Obata is a professional artist for manga who actually went to school to learn art. That's why when you look at his artwork, you can see that there's a high level of advancement to how he illustrates when it comes to designing these characters, drawing the clothing, illustrating their emotions. He puts so much great work into creating those things. Now, his partner, granted he is partnered with other people, for instance, for the story known as Raul Grad, he partnered with somebody else, but for these particular stories, he partnered with Tsugumi Ohba. Tsugumi Ohba although is able to, I guess you could say, write a good action story, doesn't actually focus on writing those types of storylines. He actually focuses on writing very in-depth, thought-out, dialogue-built storylines to actually cause a person to think whenever they're reading their material, to cause a person to be drawn in by the story as well as the art, which where you can see the partnering of Tsugumi Ohba and Takeshi Obata is so impactful. And so that's to get into some depth of the actual story. And one of the things that I want to actually take a moment to, I guess you could say, go a bit deep of my own accord. Talking about a book being dropped into the human world where instantly after just writing somebody's name, they could die. And just to be a bit more clear on those details, someone whose face you can at least see in your head and then writing their name and they die, going to the point of being able to write out how they die, that is something that's very scary to think about. And I say scary only because, to speak to my Christian brothers and sisters out there, those that claim a faith in God, those that don't believe themselves to be capable of something like that, you honestly want to really self-check and think, are you actually capable of that? In what circumstances would you be capable of that? What can make you willing to do something like that? In this story, it plays more so in a justice sense of wanting to rid the world of criminality, take out the evil people in the world so that other people can be at a higher level of being and be more at peace and not have to deal with the suffering of this world. That's one of the reasons why the main character actually goes to that extent of doing so. But when you look at yourself, if you had that in your hands, what would you do with something like that? I can really hear it now where a lot of people of faith would say, I wouldn't do anything like that. That book would be gone in an instant. That book would be disposed of. That book would be gotten rid of. Something that a lot of theoretical illustrations really do catch, I think, properly, is that people will express in a moment that they are not capable of something grotesque, of something violent, of something barbaric, of something evil. But when something actually happens in their life that can push them to becoming someone that will be willing to do something like that, simply because they think it's going to make them feel better, or because they think that it will be the right thing to do for that moment, you may actually be willing to do something like that. The reason I'm speaking to this aspect of the story, the aspect of what takes place in the story, is because we don't want to be blind to what we are capable of when we least expect it. There are dark things that we are capable of when we least expect it. As a child of God, it is important not to be negligent to the dark things that we are capable of. To get very, very, very personal, I myself have always thought through what it is that I am actually capable of. I have went through elementary, junior high, middle school, high school, having instances where whenever I was provoked, I took time in detail to think through what I would do to get that payback, to get that revenge, to have that battle, to have that fight. And it's only by the grace of God that I never experienced it. But I would be a liar, and I would make God embarrassed, or I would disgrace God if I were to act as though I never had those thoughts, to act as though I simply had the victory over them. That wasn't the case. I had planned for those. If this happens one more time, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It's going to happen in this exact order. But in all actuality, I was never faced with that opportunity. And I thank God every day that I never had to face that. And that is because I knew what I could possibly be capable of. I knew to what extent I would go if I allowed myself to give in that moment. We as Christians need to be mindful of that nature that God has saved us from, so that whenever the enemy or even life is attempting to put us in that perspective or that mindset, that we don't give in to being willing to do those things. That is why we are still in this world and go through what we go through, is because we are always being made to be prepared for what can happen. Similar to Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve walked in paradise unbeknownst to them, not knowing what could happen to them. They were responsible for being obedient and trusting in what God taught them. But because they didn't keep themselves ready for anything that could happen to them, they were willing to give into disobedience, something as simple as disobedience, to lead to them being corrupted, and in turn leading to the productivity of sin by reproducing and having sons of sin. Yes, Cain and Abel were children born into sin, because this world at that point was starting out in the sinful nature. One essence of sin is missing the mark. So in speaking in regards to bringing it back to Death Note, you can miss the mark by simply thinking that I might be doing the right thing by taking and harnessing this power in a wise manner. Remember, I told you, this gentleman here that gets his hand on a book called Death Note thinks he's doing, in one essence, the right thing. Again, I'm not trying to delve too deep into the story, but he thinks he's doing the right thing by taking the lives of those that he has taken. Now, again, like I said, we as Christians may think, we're not capable of that. We're not going to do that because God saved us. God delivered us. We are redeemed. We're going to live a redeemed lifestyle. We will not give in to the temptation of the enemy. That's what we tell ourselves to keep encouraged so that we don't. But we can't forget that we can still do those things. We can't forget that we can still do those things. We otherwise will sit as Peter, who said that he wouldn't let Jesus die, but Jesus had to rebuke him because he was speaking the language of the enemy. You have to be mindful of what you're capable of, or you'll otherwise fall on your own sword and lead to your own destruction without you even realizing that you're destroying yourselves. So I wanted to take this moment to introduce this story and why I'm speaking on this story, and even more so, not only, my manga brothers and sisters, to my manga friends and my anime friends that really like this story, and the ones that promoted me actually doing this story and seeing what I could actually talk about, what could I possibly bring up. This is where I actually want to start, because it actually starts at home first. It starts with me, and then I bring it to you. So I'm starting with myself, and I live my life knowing that I need to be mindful of the dark things that I'm capable of. If prompted with the opportunity, if given the chance, I need to be careful. I need to be careful. And I encourage you to do the same. Just be careful. Be always watching yourself. Be always thinking through everything that you do to the best of your ability. We will fall, yes. But can you even recover when you do? Can you make the wise decisions when things start to go wrong? That's one of the heavy things that this story really promotes to, is what decisions are being made once you decide that this is who you're going to be, that this is what you're going to do. Hey guys, thank you very much. I know it was a very simple video, and I know it's getting dark, but I wanted to go ahead and make sure that I followed through and letting you guys know that I'm still going through with reading Death Note. Please follow along with me, my Christian brothers and sisters. I hope that you'll be inspired, and I hope that you are inspired to watch yourself, to be mindful of yourself, and most of all, to be consulting God about what it is truly that He has saved you from becoming and who He's keeping you from becoming. Thank you, and have a blessed evening.